Hello, and welcome in, you guys, to another post-game show, this time for chapter 1175. Just in case this is your first time tuning into one of these videos, what we like to do here is that we like to go through the comment section to the previous video just to see what everybody is talking about, coming off the heels of Loki attacking the nightmare monsters, of Luffy defeating Saint Sommers, and Imu's reaction in the Holy Land. So, with that being said, let's get right to it with the top comment right here that says Luffy is meeting all kinds of dragons except his own father. Yeah, kind of crazy, huh? I mean, even Luffy meeting Dragon back at Logtown, I wouldn't consider that them meeting. You know, some people are like, oh, you know, Luffy saw Dragon, Luffy saw Dragon. Not really. You know, Luffy was staring at the ground while that happened. So, I am looking forward to Luffy meeting Dragon eventually. When will that happen, though? I'm not too sure. Is that just an interaction that takes place in the final war? Because after Elbaf, I assume we're gonna go to Lodestar. And then after Lodestar, we might go to either Laugh Tale or Marie's Raw. And if we go to Marie's Raw, that is the final war. So there is a high chance that Luffy will not meet his father until the last 5% of the story, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, will Dragon, like, stop and be like, hey, Luffy, before we fight the big bad villain, let me tell you about your mother, about the day you were born. Because I bet there is some kind of sad backstory there that Oda's definitely going to bring out into the light. So, this says, the faces of the nightmare monsters running and crying made me lamau. Yeah, it was pretty good. Honestly, when I first read the chapter, should I say the first 3 times I read the chapter, I didn't even notice the nightmare monsters' faces. I saw them running, but my main focus was on Loki, who looked freaking crazy in that panel, dude. He is just over here stomping them, blasting them. It is insane. And if you look at one of the nightmare monsters, specifically the Nidhogg one, you can tell that he knows that he's not that guy. Like, I am the nightmare, but that guy, that's the entire dream. Does that make sense? I don't think it did. I feel like we would have seen Imu react if Sommers really was dead. That is true. We saw how Imu reacted when King Herald died. So if Saint Sommers was truly dead, Imu, I don't think they'd be like on their knees huffing and puffing, but we'd get some sort of reaction. Like, oh, another covenant has been broken. Ugh, I just took 5% damage to my health bar. We definitely would have gotten something in that same vein. And I'm gonna be honest, I wonder what Imu is gonna do about Sommers after Elbaf. Like, I could easily see Imu saying, hey, Sommers, you performed poorly. Goodbye. Let's get a new God Knight in here. Or maybe Imu understands. They're like, okay, Sommers, not your best showing, but that was Luffy and Loki we're talking about. You know, maybe we just cut you some slack, brother. Hey, Sommers, how about a day off, man? Which I doubt Imu would say that, but who knows, man? Who knows? Maybe they have a good relationship. Guys, Jinbe is a water type and Thorns are a grass type. Give him a break. Yeah, so this is in reference to Jinbe not being able to free Robin from her vines, and Jinbe also being bound by Gunko's arrows for what seems to be 10 chapters. My thing is that Jinbe has really good hockey. You know, Jinbe, one of the few characters, handful of characters, mind you. Granted, I think a lot of people don't want to do it. But he can go full body blackened armament hockey mode. And it's like, man, I would have loved to see that Jinbe just bust through those arrows, rip apart the vines. He is that guy. You know, maybe I am just hyping up Jinbe too much, but he is that dude, man. So I personally would have loved to see Jinbe flex a little bit. Maybe he still does here in Elbaf. You know, maybe he still does flex really hard against the fires in the library. But we'll see. We will see. There's not enough opponents to go around here in Elbaf. I think that's my main stance right now. I want Jinbe to like fight somebody really significant, but there's not a lot of fights to go around, brother. I mean, Sommers is done for now. Killingham is, you know, hiding in the forest. And then there's Imu, who probably will just go to Luffy and Loki. So, yeah. I mean, then again, you know, this isn't like a big fight arc. This isn't like a tournament arc per se. So, you know, there doesn't have to be a fight for everybody. But Jinbe, dude, he really is just on firefighting duty and box moving duty, man. We gotta give him a new role. Imu plushie coping in the corner while Sai is glazing Loki, Luffy, and the crew. Where? What Imu? I don't have an Imu plushie. This says, ding, yearly One Piece rewatch. Man, that's some dedication and respect. I mean, One Piece is just one of those shows. I think it's just so easy to like turn on and just, I don't know, snack to. Sometimes I'll be playing games and I just have One Piece dub on the side, which, yes, I am a dub defender. I've watched it in subbed, I've watched it in dub. They're both great in my opinion. You know, I think we're at that point in time with anime where dubs aren't bad anymore. You know, back in the day, like, 20 years ago, yes, a lot of dubs were kind of cringy, but nowadays I do watch half of my anime in dub, or I watch it in sub and then I go back and watch it in dub. And generally, in 90% of cases, they're pretty good. So yeah, all that to say, but I like to watch One Piece in dub sometimes and just, throw it on the side right here, hang out, play some Deadlock or League, and lose while watching my favorite show. This says, I'm sure there was a mistranslation between the past conversation with Yarul and Shanks and Gaban in chapter 1171. It makes the most sense when Gaban asks, did you know Loki was that powerful? More than, did you know the sacred treasure was that powerful? Especially since Shanks and Gaban wouldn't know what was the sacred treasure of Elbaf. Plus, the following dialogue from Yarul, shuddering at the thought of Loki not being there, falls in line. Yeah. That's my thing. I think it's definitely just a mistranslation. My stance is always this, but unless we know Japanese, there is always going to be some nuance or some weird wording that just flies over our head. And this could definitely just be one of those instances. And sometimes it's like, oh, but the Viz is saying this, TCB is saying that, this guy on Twitter said this. This is a case where all the translators for English are in the same boat. And it's like, wait a minute, that sounds odd, but it is what it is. We can kind of infer what was going on here. But yeah, to anybody who doesn't know, this is when they're asking about the sacred treasure, saying, hey, Yarul, what did you know about this? And he's like, oh, I knew nothing at all. And then in this chapter, he's giving us like the full, 911 breakdown. So this says, the God of War is named Elbaf. It's been said previously. Yes, this was said all the way back in Little Garden by Dory, if I recall correctly. And it's interesting because it's been so long. And back in the day, at least, a lot of people thought that this was a mistranslation or some wonky dialogue. So I held a poll to see how many people believe that Elbaf is actually the guy's name. Of course, we're going to go through the poll at a later date because I just threw it up. But as you can see right here at the initial rulings, 70% of people do believe that Elbaf was his name. And I kind of do fall in the same boat. I wish we had better evidence than just one dialogue line from, 20 years ago. But Elbaf being his name makes sense to me because we're talking about giants here. We're talking about savages. Genuinely, there's not a more barbarian thing to do than to name your land after the strongest guy around. That right there just seems like something the giants of Elbaf would do. Is that subtle racism? Yes. But does it make sense? Also yes. And one thing this does remind me of are the Tontados at Dressrosa. Of course, this was a gag, but they did start adding land to the end of each Straw Hat name. Of course, this is in reference to Noland, but they had Uso Land, Luffy Land, Zoro Land, Frankie Land, Robbie Land, you get the gist, right? So Elbaf being named after the God of War, and also Elbaf is known as War Land, I think just fits somehow, some way. So, real quick, but before we get to the next comment, we gotta talk about the sponsor of this video, me! There is no sponsor, I just wanted to plug myself real quick, but first up, thank you guys so much for watching this video, I really freaking appreciate it. We've come a long way in the past couple of years, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without you guys right here. But now it's time to plug myself. Please, if you have a second, feel free to check out my channel over here at Syvduck, SYVDUCK, on YouTube and Twitch. I live stream on Twitch every night, super late at night, and I also upload gameplay content over on my YouTube channel under that same name. Outside of that, I also have Somnus Reacts right here, where I react to anime, mainly JJK, Frieren, and soon to be One Piece when that comes back. And, yeah, back to the video. Alright, the next comment says, remember, he showed up in his underwear at the beginning of this arc. He wasn't ready for any of this. Yeah, Saint Sommers, man. He wasn't dressed or nothing. He just got the phone call that he was going to be sent to Elbaf too. Like, he was like, just give me a little bit of time. And then boom, teleported in. I kind of feel bad for him. He wasn't expecting none of it. Like, imagine waking up one day, regular Tuesday, and somebody says, hey, we're sending you to fight Sun God Nika and the Nidhogg fruit. Huh? What do you mean? And dude, his dialogue when he showed up, he said that he didn't want to run into a Yonko. Yeah, he was not ready for it. He knows his place, and unfortunately, we're not going to see him for a while. And I say unfortunately because he is a fun character to follow. Whether you think he's a heinous villain or not, you got to admit, his dialogue is pretty funny. Seeing him get walloped is really funny. He's a great guy, man. He's a great guy. Generational YouTube refresh. Sommers been getting straight curb stomp. He has, dude. He has. Straight up cartoon character physics with him. This says, the God of War squirrel was a different squirrel. It must have died and became a devil fruit and was eaten by the hammer. Yes, I think this is the most logical route, of course, because it was, X amount of years ago. Anything is really possible when going all the way back to the first world, but this is the most logical route. I think this is what pretty much everybody generally believes. Just, oh, the squirrel died, boom, reincarnated as a devil fruit, boom, hammer ate it. Or we could just go with possession, because like I said, 3,000 years can do a lot to the story. This says, assuming the sun god was big enough to clash with the giant warrior, I wouldn't be surprised if the giant sword belongs to Nika. Yeah, that could be the case. Somebody had to have wielded that giant sword in the past that we see here in Elbaf. It belonging to Nika, I think, is really cool. And one thing I want to throw this back to is the shape of Elbaf as well. So when you look at it, right, it has the Sun Realm, Heaven Realm, and Underworld. It looks like at the Sun Realm, the tree at one point in time was chopped right there. I'd like to imagine the sword is what might have done that. Maybe there's a big fight there, and then boom, swords clash, the tree was cut in half, and now it is regrown to the point where we have the Heaven Realm again. That is my initial assumption, at least. This says, on Jinbe not being capable of destroying the thorns, I think Oda is trying to establish Sanji is still number 3 on the crew. The thing is, okay, hear me out. Agenda aside, I don't think anybody truly believed Jinbe was number 3. I do not think so. Like, if you thought that Jinbe was ever replacing Sanji as number 3 in the crew, I do think it's a little bit of bias there, like, against Sanji. Like, Oda has always depicted it as Luffy, Zoro, then Sanji. Even if we had Jinbe joining, I just feel like he wouldn't take that slot after all these years. So, yeah, this could be Oda establishing it, but I also think Oda just wanted to hype up Sanji's fire, and it could, again, be foreshadowing that Sanji is the perfect matchup against Saint Sommers. He is his actual weakness. This says, you are scary if even the nightmare monsters are afraid of you. Yeah, dude. I mean, they probably have never met anybody bigger than them. Well, granted, they were born like 10 minutes ago, but still, dude, still. Technically, though, since they're just nightmare monsters, could Killingham bring them out as bigger variants of themselves? Maybe. I guess if you were to put Loki to sleep and then you brought out his nightmare, that should be bigger than him? Question mark? Because Killingham is bringing out the nightmare of the kids, and that's like, 100 times their size. So maybe there's just like a multiplier there. So you put Loki to sleep, for example, and then boom, his nightmare is like even bigger. I don't know. I mean, I guess first up, Killingham would have to put Loki to sleep, which I don't think is going to be easily done. I do not think Killingham could just do this and then Loki's passed out. Maybe. I mean, it is like a semi-gimmick ability. Like, if you don't know it's coming, you might get hit by it. But at the end of the day, you could just hockey burst out of it like Law with Doc Q's ability. So, we'll see. I haven't had this much fun with a villain like Sommers in quite a while. He straddles the line of pathetic, fun, and can't wait to see him get destroyed by everyone so well. Exactly. This is why I think Sommers is such a good villain. And, when it comes to Sommers now, I'm not even mad that he's not strong. I want the Gaunets to be those guys, and I still think a majority of them will be. But Sommers is like the one guy we sacrifice for the comedy. Because so far, Oda has only depicted Sommers as this person. The rest of the Gaunets could be like that too. We haven't seen them yet. But Sommers specifically, out of Gunko, Killingham, and Shamrock, Oda tossed this guy to the wayside, saying, you know what? Let's just have fun with him. He is a bad guy. Yes, he is funny. Yes, we all want to see him get stomped. That is our GOAT. He is significantly better than Orochi, whom I just gritted my teeth through the longer he lasted and just wished it would be over ASAP. Yeah, I never liked Orochi. No, I'm the same way. Like, he is a necessary villain, but he wasn't a fun villain. He wasn't even pleasing to look at. No, I did not like Orochi either. Like, very necessary to the story, but my god, I hated him, dude. This says, I believe this chapter confirms that Shamrock had no idea how powerful Loki was. I mean, that's the whole thing with the Nidhogg fruit, right? If Imu is surprised by Nidhogg, then everybody else will be surprised as well. One thing I am kind of curious about is Loki's special bounty. I remember initially we assumed the special bounty was because of his devil fruit, but now that Imu is shocked by the devil fruit reveal, we can assume that the special bounty was given to Loki for a different reason. And I think the most easiest route to go down is just that Loki is the Prince of Elbaf. Because he's a prince, he gets a special bounty. Because they wanted to recruit him into the God Knights, he gets a special bounty. I think that is where I am currently at. Or it could be the eyes. You know, maybe the eyes are the reason he's special. Which again, hopefully, going back to Imu, hopefully they say something about Loki's eyes. Like, oh, it's been 900 years since those eyes have popped up. You're looking at me the same way he did in the past. Please, Imu. We need to, like, give Imu a couple bottles of alcohol, man. Get that man talking. This says, I think it's kind of funny that Luffy basically just went, screw it, I'm dropping a nuke on Sommers. Yeah. You know, it is hilarious when you think about it. You know, comparing the Sommers fight, in quotation marks, fight, to any other person Luffy's fought. Typically, Luffy will, you know, start in base form, go to gear 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then 5th. Here, he just says, you know what? Let's just use 1,000,000% power and knock him out and move on. Luffy is not wasting time here. He wants to fight Imu ASAP, I bet. He's having too much fun with Loki. He doesn't have time for the like of Saint Sommers. Sommers saw the first page of the bounties and just said, bet, that's all that matters. Yeah, him being surprised at Zoro is hilarious. He's like, oh, Yonko Luffy? Alright, I don't gotta look at the crew. I'm only scared of this dude, but yeah, next generation Rayleigh coming in hot with Zoro. Next generation Scapagabon coming in literally hot with Sanji. Sommers is definitely not gonna have any fun fighting the next generation, just like the last one. This says, that was some uncomfortably accurate phrasing. What did I say right there? You know, it's funny. I did see this comment earlier, and I was like, huh, what did I say?
Saint Sommers is like flipping left and right on what he wants to do. You know, on one hand, he has to please Imu-sama, but on the other hand, he wants to please himself.
Yeah, that is accurate. I mean, that is the whole thing, right? Sommers, he's like a dog. I don't know how to explain it. You've been wagging this bone in front of him. You've been throwing it and picking it up and hiding it behind your back. He just wants the bone, brother. That is all it is. And it is very accurate phrasing on my part. Yeah, I gotta pat myself on the back for that one. The sheer amount of times Luffy has used his final form since Wano, though, yes. I mean, this is like his base form now, you know? Like, you start a fight, boom, just gear 5th right off rip. It kind of reminds me of Super Saiyan Blue from Dragon Ball Super. It's like, because we're now going Super Saiyan Blue and Super Saiyan God, we don't really need Super Saiyan 3 anymore. We don't need Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 1. We instead just jump all the way to the next power cliff. And I will admit, I do kind of miss the days of gear 2nd, man. I do. Maybe there will be like another gear, though. I do not think gear 5th is Luffy's final form. I think there will be one more transformation. And it could be like a full Zoan mode of Nika. Like maybe he turns into the OG Sun God, where it doesn't really look like Luffy anymore. Because I think gear 5th, in my opinion, that's kind of like his hybrid. Like he has qualities of Nika, but he also has qualities of himself. And that's kind of like the same of gear 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. But I bet there's like a gear 6 where he's full Nika. Like maybe he looks like the silhouette we got in this chapter. Which granted, it's not really a silhouette. I think the OG Sun God really was just like this darkened figure. But we'll see. You know, Gear Death is still on the table, boys. Dude, I love that, man. You remember Gear Death? Before we got Sun God Nika, they're like, oh my god, the next gear is gonna go even crazier, more edgy. Maybe that's still in the cards, man. Maybe it's still in the cards. This comment says, I think Yarl has sword-induced dementia. He has to, man. There's no way he survives that blow to the head, through the head. and he doesn't have some sort of issue, right? Dude, his sworn brother, Yorul, died to a suplex. Big Mom tossed him, and he died. Jarl got stabbed through the head and he's okay? I don't know, man. Something's going on here. Something's going on here. We need Law to pull out the sword, though. Jokes aside, I really hope we get that sword back because it is touted as a legendary blade. It could be genuinely one of the 12 supreme grade blades in the story. We're still missing, I think, like 7 of them right now. If Jarl's sword is one of them, we need that bad boy out ASAP. And I do want Law and Kid to come to Elbaf. Blasphemous. I know this is a tangent. I know the comment had nothing to do with this. But Law and Kid are the ones who beat Big Mom. When we were at the Elbaf feast, the Giants were like, "Hey, Luffy, you beat Big Mom. We love you, dude." That wasn't Luffy. Luffy actually had question marks over his head. Stolen valor. We need Law and Kid here because they're the ones who really did it. And of course, because they have nowhere else to go. Law lost his ship. Kid lost his ship. Kid was last seen off the coast of Elbaf. Law is with his navigator Beppo. And guess what? The log posts have not reset yet. So the next island closest to them is Elbaf. I think Law and Kid coming here after the Imu battle, or maybe even during the Imu battle, that'd be a plot twist. That'd be a lot of fun. We could pull out the Jarl sword. They could get new ships with the Atomwood here in Elbaf. It would be an amazing plot point. I do still stand by that 1000%. It's just a matter of like when they next show up. Maybe them showing up during the Imu battle might be too soon for a lot of people, but I don't know. I feel like time-wise it makes sense. Time-wise it does make sense because Beppo and Law, they were on Winter's Island, which is near Elbaf. Luffy traveled from Egghead Island to Elbaf in that same amount of time. And then as far as Kid goes, he's just right there. As long as somebody just dives in the water and picks him up, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. This comment says, the MMA monsters having the eyes popping out when they're looking at Loki had me dead. Luffy hyping up his vice captain was so wholesome. Their trust and bonds are what make One Piece such an impactful story. Ange has a gun to the owl's head. No, Ange was in the chapter. Ange was hiding in the background. I want to run a poll among 8 to 15-year-old Japanese boys asking if they find Usopp funny. He's got to scratch the itch for somebody out there, man. He's got to. But you got to remember, One Piece is an aging story. It has an aging audience. I started One Piece when I was like 9 years old. I started picking it up, reading the manga, watching the show on TV. Of course, I wasn't like following vehemently back then. But here I am like 20 years later. And it's like, yeah, Usopp's comedy, it was kind of funny back in the day, but nowadays I don't really find it that funny. Now I just want beats, man. Now I just want beats, which I still think he has it in him. Until Elbaf is over, I will be coping for Usopp. Even though he's not my favorite character, even though the gags are falling on deaf ears, I really wish Usopp the best. I do. The horn shape on the dragon during Jarl's explanation matches the dragon on the mural, so it's confirmed that it is the Nidhogg in the mural. Yes. I mean, the dragon horns can flip-flop. Maybe Loki didn't want to transform his regular horns. Maybe they could have went the other way, but he wanted them to go backwards. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. This says, Jarl probably just had early onset dementia or bad memory because of the sword. That one viewer named Joey must have felt singled out. Yeah, dude. So essentially, in my last video, I opened it up by just saying Joey. But that is because I cut out like the previous 10 seconds leading up to that, where I was just talking about koalas. I think I said koala like 10 times, and then I ended up with Joey because that is the cover page. And I was like, you know what? It would be absolutely stupid if I just put no context in there and just said Joey. So that is exactly what I did. But with that being said, though, guys, thank you so much for joining me in this video. I really freaking appreciate it. Make sure to drop your thoughts on 1175 finally down below as per usual. And we will be back in the next couple of days with the SBS video. Unless I already posted it because I'm slow at editing. We'll see. And then we should also have a poll video coming up relatively soon. So stay tuned for that. But until then, you guys take care. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way until the end. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, brothers.